Hello and welcome to Songs from the Ruhr Room, dedicated to singer-songwriters from Belgium and beyond. Brett Perkins has been in the songwriting industry for many decades, not only as a singer-songwriter in his own right, but as a songwriter coach, a consultant, and he also runs very successful international songwriter retreats. Brett has also been a member of several organisations, such as the National Academy of Songwriters, the Kerrville Folk Festival Foundation, and Taxi.com, just to name a few. I was fortunate enough to spend some time online recently with Brett discussing the art and craft of songwriting, tips and tricks for success in the business, and just about good songwriting in general. So whether you're a beginner songwriter or a seasoned professional, I know you'll take away some valuable information from this video. So please subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, maybe leave a comment below about your own experiences in songwriting, maybe share this with other singer-songwriters that you know out there. Enjoy the talk. Over to Brett. Very welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. So tell us a little bit about your background in the field first, please, if you would.
Well, as a songwriter, a conscious songwriter, I should say, from the writing my first song intentionally, that was, I have to count now, 44 years ago.
Wow.
Yes.
So you're no spring chicken.
I'm no spring chicken, but I am continually learning. I think that's one of the wonderful things about songwriting is I imagine this is true with most other crafts. If you continually stay interested and curious and try to stretch, you evolve, and as you evolve as a person, your lyrics and your song arrangements can evolve as well. So you don't age out of songwriting. You age out of being a pop star, but you don't age out of songwriting.
You're involved in lots of different organizations in the States. You're based in Denmark now, I know, but tell us a little bit about the organizations maybe that you were involved in.
The first major songwriting organization I joined as a member was the National Academy of Songwriters. And I joined to network, and just right out of high school, I was 17 when I joined. And I remember going to their major fundraising event in Los Angeles, which was a concert called the Salute to the American Songwriter. And it was the first concert I'd been to where I knew almost none of the names on the stage, and yet I knew all the songs they were playing, because this was about the people who actually wrote the songs, which is at that point was not often the artist who you knew the song through. So that was an amazing experience. And I remember saying to my songwriting partner at the time, who was with me, I'm going to be on that stage one day. And here's the thing about being very specific with the universe. I was on that stage 20 years later, producing the show. I was not performing on the show. So it's very important to be clear. But I ended up having various roles in the organization voluntarily, and then on staff, and then became managing director, and then the executive director and CEO for 2 years in the mid-90s. So that was my main activity. And then I went on to work with the Kerrville Folk Festival Foundation for 1 year. I headed that foundation with Rod Kennedy, the founder of the festival, and started the Unisong International Song Competition with my partners, Alan Roy Scott and David Stark, David of Songlink, who's got a new book out right now about his youth in London with the Fab Four. And then from there, I was working for Taxi.com, one of the first online pitching services, still very much in existence. And I did that for about 10 years. And then I moved to Denmark and started the retreats, the listening room, international songwriting retreats in 2002, and was producing the whole listening room idea took root over here. I was doing shows in LA, a monthly series in South Pasadena. And then I brought the idea to Denmark, and there was quite good support and interest. They were just getting an inkling of, they were, I don't want to say behind, but their whole, what was happening in Los Angeles and the sort of singer-songwriter reemergence or performing songwriter reemergence in the States in, say, the mid-90s, started here in the start of the 2000s. So it was lucky timing, and
Wonderful. And
Yeah.
where are you run these retreats all over Europe, all over the world, really now? Do you?
Yeah, well, not in the last year, I'll tell you.
Hmm.
But
So
yeah, yes. The roster, when it is active, and let's hope that that's soon,
fingers crossed
is lovely Ireland on Inisheer,
in this year.
Tuscany in the Florence region of Italy, Siciliot, Greenland. There's a place to visit. That's
Wow.
amazing. Two of them per year in Idlewild, California, a mountain community about 2 hours up above LA.
Yeah.
And of course, Denmark, Copenhagen, Denmark. There have been other events in Sweden, in Greece, Crete, in
Yes.
Spain, but these are the main ones now that I'm doing. And I was planning to launch Iceland this year, but that was a year ago.
That was a year ago. Yeah.
Not happening. So that's okay. I have plenty to do in the meantime.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, you're always busy with it, and it's great to see that. So we'll go through some of the. I heard many. I've heard a couple of your seminars about the music business and about songwriting
Mm.
myself. So I'll let you talk about what you go about those things now. You can wrap it on there if you like. I'll edit this
Yeah.
out, and
Okay.
we'll talk a little bit about what you do in those seminars if you don't mind.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about primarily not so much about the business, but about songwriting.
Yes.
Because for me, the business comes secondary to songwriting. Now, that may not be true. I know there are some people who write professionally, and it is a focus on the business. Their writing is that, and I'm not critical of that. It's just not. I'm not that animal, So,
Mhm.
uh,
Mhm.
for better or worse. So, my focus is on, and as I led these retreats, and as I worked with writers now for some 30 years, and talking to quite a few, not just newcomers, but well-established working writers, and also many of my musical heroes growing up. About the process, I got very much more interested in the thing that seemed to be common for all of us, was the idea of getting blocked, or where's my next idea going to come
Yeah.
from? Lack of inspiration, or doubt about one's creative process that seems to be inherent in the process for creatives. I've seen that
Yeah.
about writers of novels and poems and films. And so that the psychology around how do I get my head into writing when maybe I'm not having my aha moment that happened, 10 years ago when I wrote that one song that everybody loves. So, uh, it led me to some questions that I ask myself and I ask people to consider when they start writing.
Right.
And first is, what is their intention in writing a song? And that may be a question you ask after you've written your first draft of the song. Sometimes they just come and they show
Yes.
up, and that's lovely when that happens. Um, I have experienced and known others to experience getting an inspiration, starting working on an idea, and then their mind shifts over to the business, where could I sell this? Is this marketable? Does this sound like something else on the radio? All these questions, which have a valid place at some point in the process, but they front load it into their creative process, and it often shuts down the
Right.
flow of the creation. So um, that's I, as much as possible, just practice keeping those questions out of my writer's room until I'm ready. So my first draft is not for anybody but me. I'm going to delve deep and be as free and unfettered as possible in my
Yeah.
writing process, including being critical about lyric, being any of this stuff that I know used to hang me up. Oh, I used a cliche. I have to stop and fix that. No, I'll come back to that later. I know craft. I'll get to the craft. Right now I'm in the flow of creating, and
Yeah.
I don't want to stop and bring on my critical tools if they're going to be an impediment to what I'm capturing.
Yes.
Wherever this stuff's coming from, which is the big mystery, and the reason we can talk about songwriting all day long and never define it or contain it.
Indeed.
So, and then the other question is more for writers. Well, and again, for myself, and again, usually after I've done the first draft, I've sort of followed the juice, or either I had a clear idea in mind, or sometimes I was just having that inspired feeling, that pick up the guitar and something comes out. What is my intent? Meaning, not every song needs to go on a CD, needs to go, be pitched or sold or played before a live audience. I had an example once. It was my friend Tom Kimmel gave a great example. He was in a workshop and people were able to bring songs in and have feedback like I do in mine. And he and I did several of those together. And there was a gentleman there who said, "Oh, I'd like to play you a song that I wrote for my wife on our wedding day." And Tom said, "Oh, what a beautiful idea." And he said, "When was this?" And the guy said, "Oh, it was about 30 years ago." And Tom said, "Well, what happened when you played, before we hear the song, what happened when you played the song?" He said, "Oh, everyone was in tears." And Tom said, "Then it's a perfect song. We don't need to touch it, because you wrote it with a specific intent and it did exactly what you wanted it to do."
Yeah.
And so if we were to take that song and put it under a different type of microscope and different type of considerations, like, is this something that could be covered, or it's going to be a difficult and perhaps painful process, because that's the personal is universal, and yet it also isn't. It's the paradox. Paradox. So he maybe had a lot of really specific references. I never heard the song. I don't believe that Tom did either, but that were very specific to that group. So it was targeted to that group. And I know I've certainly written songs that were more about my needing to discover and discharge some emotion or something I was upset about, or whether that was political or relationship or something. And some of those songs, they're just that exercise. That was their purpose. The idea that I have this, again, paradox. Every song is to me sacred in a way, not to put too big a word on it, but they're a gift. They're something I'm thankful that they show up. But not every one of them is to be offered to the world and expect people to see it as I see it.
Right.
To have the same reverence for it.
Yes.
So to have less reverence, I have more reverence for the process and not necessarily for the final outcome. So that's a big question, and it's the question. For me, it was, and I offer it up in my workshops. When I say, you write a song, do you wish to communicate with this song? Now, if I say, would you like this song to be on the radio? They say, yeah, sure. Would you like this song to be sung by millions? Of course I would. Those are the easy, and those are the dream answers for many of us. I mean, I think every song I'm writing is a hit when I'm writing it, because I'm so in love with it. How could it? I'm infatuated. I have no perspective. That's right. which is great for the creative process, not necessarily for the final draft, but so. It is a valid question, because if you're writing that song for your partner, or you're, about a loss in your life, or joyful, whatever, then it served its purpose. However, if you say, yes, I would like to record this, or yes, I would like to demo this and send it out, or have other artists perform it, or have people moved by it in the way that I'm moved by it, now you're considering communication. It's no longer self-expression alone, but it's self-expression with the desire to communicate with others. And that brings in a different set of considerations as a writer. To my way of thinking, it requires objectivity and consideration of the question I've heard so often. If I didn't know this story that I wrote, because it's usually my story or my version of. If I didn't already know it, would I have any idea what I was saying? Would I get it?
Yes.
Yeah, and there's a lot of songs, where and I can't tell you how many times I've been giving constructive feedback, because I don't think there's any point in giving destructive feedback, although there are some people quite good at giving it out. We have TV shows for that now. And the person will say, well, hang on. Oh, if you didn't understand the verse, let me explain what happened. And I say, yeah, you you don't get to explain your song. There's just that opportunity
No,
is
the
isn't
message
there.
needs to be there to begin with, right?
Yeah, and that was
Yeah.
explained to me early on in a poignant way, and it really was difficult the day it was delivered to me. But I really get that it was a gift that the person who told me that story, who made that point to me as I sat there as a young enthusiastic songwriter playing my latest work and saying, "But oh, you don't understand? Let me tell you what happened because this is a true story."
Mm.
So, and even that, the idea of perhaps when you're writing a song because you're so close to it, you've had some momentous occasion in your life and you write about it, then it's really important often to you that it's very true. Like that man's song to his wife, I imagine was very true and very specific.
Yeah.
What I heard more and more often when I spoke to professional songwriters, and by that I mean people whose work had clearly connected with a wide audience more than once. They were working songwriters whose work continued to resonate with different audiences. They would say, "Well, what's true for the song?" And I thought, "Oh, that's a new way of looking at it."
Yeah, well, explain that now.
Well, the idea that, at least again, I go back to my own story. I was writing purely for self-expression for so many years. I didn't even really consider. Of course, I wanted people to like it, but I didn't consider why they wouldn't get it. Because I was so entranced in my own
Enamored
process.
with it. Yeah,
Yeah,
indeed.
and that's part of the evolution of writing, I think, and so the joy of sharing. You share it, you say, "Wow!" But after a few years of recording and spending time and money and energy and putting it out there, and there was no wow on the other end, I thought, "Huh,
Hold on." Yeah.
hold on, how come?" And you start asking objective questions about, okay, what am I not seeing? What am I not hearing? What am I not communicating? And fortunately, there are workshops, and there are so many books and things out there, of varying degrees of helpfulness. I once read a book that said you have to have a great, killer opening line, and you have to talk about love in a way that no one's ever talked about it, and that shut me down for for weeks. I thought, oh, come on, although they're valid points, but they weren't what I needed to hear in that my stage. So this idea of what's true for the song. So basically, again, communication is the story that's being told. And not all songs are story songs, and not all songs make literal sense. And I'm not an advocate of songs having to make literal, clear sense. The classics like Nirvana, Smells Like Teen Spirit. There was a whole industry of jokes about what is he singing. But I got the song when I heard it. I got the energy. I got this like, whoa. For me, it was really profound and went in deep, even if I didn't get the lyric. And to a certain extent, I feel that I was just listening recently to a songwriter from Sweden, and I don't understand Swedish. I have a limited understanding of Danish, but I got the feeling of those songs. It's there. Language is important. It's very important in writing, and yet, within the human voice and within the melodic choices and the arrangement choices, there's so much there that when it works well, the words are married to that emotion.
When I was at the Copenhagen Songwriter Festival with you, listening to some of your great talks about this, Brett, you referred to the 3 C's within songwriting, and they were clarity, contrast, and cohesiveness.
Yes.
Can you just talk a little bit about those, please, for us?
Yes, and they're connected for me to this. They are part of that secondary set of considerations after you've written your full first draft. I keep driving that point home because what I experienced earlier, well, for me, realizing that every song is a first draft is truly like one of the great breakthroughs for me as a writer.
The amount of people these days, especially who want to write something quickly and get it out as quickly as possible, is a bit astounding. And I keep, as you were saying, try to remind them of this fact that it is a first draft and it should be worked on and worked on and worked on.
Yeah, I mean, there are those rare moments where something, you know, shows up sort of in completed form, and you say thank you very much to whoever you thank for that. For that,
Yeah.
But craft to me is, you know, it's the selective, critical eye at the right time. And what I found in reading some of the songwriting books, and it had to do with me and where I was at that time. But and I found this even with people in my workshops before I started speaking about and realizing the importance of seeing everything as a work in process rather than a finished first, you know, final draft, first draft, final draft. Is that they were taking my 3 C's and it was interfering with their writing process because they would say, "Well, there's
Focusing
this,
too much on them.
yeah, you know," and it's like, "No, no, 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 no. This was really meant. This is later. This is later. You know, this is 2 weeks after you started." So, you know, yeah. And I have also seen really wonderful songs created in pressure situations where there was a popular show in Los Angeles. I think it might still be running. Well, it's not in the clubs right now, but where writers had 10 minutes. The audience gave them a theme. They went off and wrote, and then they competed as to who nailed that theme. I mean, 10 minutes with a theme somebody handed you. And it was incredible what craft they could bring in. That was where the craft really came in. You could hear the folks who had the tools to assemble something that worked in 10 minutes time. So, yeah, there's no wrong way to go about it as far as I'm concerned. But the best way to go about it to me is to free your creative process as much as possible from these critical questions unless this awareness of these 3 C's, which I'm going to define soon, so people aren't wondering, well, what is he going to tell us what they are? Until they're running as a sort of background software, you know, they're not interfering, they're not stopping the flow, but they're informing subtle decisions you make as you go along in the writing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. So the 3 C's for me, where I developed it, and I'm sure we could have 3 D's and 3 E's and 3 F's. I just like the sound of 3 C's. Was when I was working for Taxi.com, which I mentioned briefly earlier. And I was one of the critiquers, one of the screeners who would listen to 6 to 8 songs per hour. That was our required number. And these were songs being submitted for other artists, for film, for TV, for numerous, whatever the description of the project. And we were required first to decide whether this was a song that fit the pitch and whether it should be forwarded. And often that was a very narrow field. Like they'd say the record company would, or whoever set it up would say, we want the 10 best songs, and there could be over 1,000 entries.
Wow.
So that gets really tough. But what I discovered, and we were required to give at least 3 salient points on how to potentially improve the song that we were listening to. So toughest mental work I've ever done. Exhausting. I mean, I never pushed so much caffeine and sugar in my life. But what it made me really aware of is how songs either engaged me or lost me.
Yeah.
And of course that's subjective. And yet I was not I was in one hand a very subjective listener because I had guidelines as to what we were listening for as far as forwarding it. But I was very objective in that I'm there rooting for the songwriter. I'm hoping every one of them, you know, gets forwarded. So, and I'm putting on every song like I'm opening a Christmas gift going, oh, what's this going to, you know,
right. Yeah.
As most people consume music, they're looking for something. Yeah. They're the listener. This is the conversation. This is the question of, are we communicating? You know? So I was being the active listener and really focused, not driving in my car, not, you know, riding my bike with an earbud things and yet into the verse, I'm starting to go, what did he mean? Or what did she, wait a minute, or I'm not seeing anything. They're just telling me I did this, I did that, I did this. And then I felt like this. I'm like, well, yeah, but I'm here. I want my feelings in this song. You know, I mean, Freud has been discredited on a few things, and sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. However, he was right, I think, about people being interested in themselves first. It's our ego nature. We can evolve past it. We can practice past it, but it's a part of our growth. And I am moved by a song that touches me because I see myself in that song, in that film, in that character, in that book, in that play. So so clarity was the first thing that I found myself commenting on the majority of the songs. This is where the 3 C's came from. So, and clarity meaning again, not every song has to be understood literally, but I wasn't getting anything, or what I was getting was not clear. So, and what I realized is the challenge for all of writers is that we are, even when we're making a story up, it's still coming through us, through our emotional body, through our mind. And so it's subjective.
Yeah.
It's just an inherently subjective process. So, and we know what we're saying, and we know where we're going. We know how the story ends because we have written it. Yeah. So by the time we're through, back before I realized everything was a first draft, I thought when I finished the song, it was done. Because I got to the end,
Yeah.
And I would play it and people would say, we didn't know where you were going, and most people won't wait until the end to then think back to what the first and second verse and the bridge meant. Right. So I was intending to draw out a bit more awareness of, hey, if you didn't know this story, would you know this story? And we didn't have a lot of time to make these comments, but I just found that this was a very, very, very common. The second C was in his contrast. And this can apply to many things, but the simplest and the way I found myself using it most often was melodic contrast between a verse and a chorus. Seems like the simplest thing, but it's incredible how often people don't hear that they haven't really moved from their verse to their chorus. They call it something different, and lyrically they've changed, so it's a chorus in a thematic way. Usually they get that, but they don't hear that they haven't created a contrast. Now, must they create a contrast? No. And certainly in traditional songs of early years, of the old tribal songs and the songs of large groups, pre-printed word, you had basic, just very simple repetitive melodies because it was oral history was being translated in this way. But pop music, which is now about 100 years, 1920s to 2020, we've got about 100 years of popular song, Irving Berlin and that gang, and songs have done roller coaster.
Yes.
Doesn't mean chorus has to always go up. Doesn't mean the verse can't be higher than the chorus, all that. And yet there is an expectation of contrast. And so I would often point out that if I hummed the root note through the verse, I could hum it through the chorus. They were there. I had a consultation session earlier today, and we were dealing with this very thing, and the writer hadn't seen it. And then we saw it. He said, "Oh, it's totally obvious." When I break it up, but see, he was inside the song. He was in the story he was telling. He was in the, he was still in that first draft. And to his credit, he's bringing those first drafts to someone to give him an objective ear. I didn't do that. I didn't ask for anybody to give me feedback. Okay. I was 17 when I went to my first, so I'll take that back. I was a little wiser than I thought, but I was not happy when he gave me his feedback. Let me tell you.
Yeah, I know, but sometimes that can be the best thing. That
it was.
Here.
It was so spot on.
That moment of it's great.
It was so spot on.
I remember, rest his soul, Ralph Murphy.
Yes.
Workshops, and
yes,
he did the same thing. When you bring him your song, you sing it with all gusto and all the love you have, and he goes, yes, but this and this, and who is this and who is that, but why did you change character? And then you went, oh my god, stuff you just don't see yourself.
No, you don't see it. And I have so much empathy for that. because I am that, we are that
we are.
person. I am that one.
Yeah.
So and yet if you want your work, again, back to that question, look, if you're happy writing songs, playing them for your wife, your boyfriend, your whatever, your group of friends, your mates, and they love it and you're content, you don't need to do any of this stuff. Don't sweat it. Just enjoy it. Your life will be simpler.
Yes, very much so. Yeah. Don't worry about the business part or the creation of something.
The craft. Yeah. Which was a word I objected to intensely when I came up, because I came out of a garage band and doing, it was all heart and all passion. And that was something. We did have an audience. We were like, kind of a buzz band in our area. We could draw a few hundred people when we played, but because the energy, the energy, when I look back now, the tracks had a lot of juice to them and a lot of edge. And it was really speaking to, it was kind of a post-punk new wave era, early 80s. And even some of the lyric stuff was kind of cool, but it didn't translate to the big screen. It didn't leave the little pond because it's a fishbowl thing. It just worked for our little community, So as I have applied Taxi, that again, most difficult work I ever did. And I have one more C to go. As I started to realize I was saying this about everyone else's songs, there's this old adage, I imagine you've heard, we teach what we most need to learn. I will not say that I was suddenly like, oh, I'll apply this to my work, because I still saw my work as wonderful, and I was just waiting for the world to acknowledge me. So I mean, ego is a huge part of this, because we have such an investment, and I don't use ego as a negative. I mean,
but it's just inbuilt.
Yeah. One of the I love memes. I used to love one-frame cartoons, now called memes. My 11-year-old says I got to upgrade my language, get hip. Okay. And so even though she also says I'll never be. So the idea that this, if someone says they killed their ego, that's like the most egotistical statement I can make. Who's saying I killed my ego? Like,
how dare you?
So it was funnier than me. Anyway, so the third C is cohesiveness. And what I meant, I usually put my hands together like this, like in the table of elements in my science class that I barely passed in high school. I do remember that the density of certain carbon and lead and the tightness of it. So in a song, and in the feedback I was giving, and eventually to myself as well, it did sink in, was cutting away. And this is definitely not first draft. This is fifth draft or whatever. This is when you get some distance, and time is the thing that gives distance to me. I have to be over the infatuation. I have to be sort of on to the next romance, if you will.
Yes.
The next new song that's got me excited, so that I can then listen. And here's a tip. Don't play the song and try and be objective about it, because while you're playing it, you're triggering the body memory, people familiar with NLP and these ideas that the body, neuro-linguistic programming, they're not the only ones who talk about the idea that the body has memory, retains memory. So when you're singing, you're activating emotional memory, resonance, all this stuff. It's going to get in the way of your objectivity. So also the feeling, the remembrance of how it was when you wrote that song. What if you cried when you wrote the song? Now you're playing it for the 30th time. You might still feel something.
Yeah.
So if you record it and then you give yourself some time and then you go back and you just put it on and listen, you're already distancing. You're physically distancing yourself. So this is that's
a good tip. Yeah.
It's a really good tool, actually. Yeah, I think it's, the more I've lived with it, I think it's quite a good one. And I'm sure it's not an original thought, but it was for me when it happened. And this is where the cohesiveness comes in, because in listening, when I'm sitting there playing, if you use an instrument to play or singing or whatever that is, I really like doing that. It's one of my favorite things. It has been throughout my life. So I can sit and strum a G chord as an intro to a song for 12 bars and be a happy camper. I also know where I'm going. I'm building up to something in my emotional mind. Now, for a listener, 12 bars of the same chord strummed the same way with no hook over it, no melody or anything. That's just, they're done. You know, I mean, I would be. I mean, if you're trying to stretch your set out at the gig, sure,
Yeah.
you know, do your extended dance version, whatever that is. But so I was saying to people, you have a 16 bar intro that has without a hook, so consider cutting it to 8, and then, or even 4. And I've become, I really do like microsurgery on my stuff.
Yeah.
And in the studio, I mean, I really trim. I trim and trim. I go too far, and then sometimes I have to put things back. But that's my
that's your
process. Yeah, because I started out with the 4 and 5 minute songs, like a lot of people, you know. And not to say that a 4 or 5 minutes is a wrong length for a song, but again, generally speaking, popular song, 100 years of history. Look at the classics. Look at what it's built on. Look at the Elvis. Look at the Beatles. Look at Irving Berlin. 2.5 minutes. So we got up to like 5 minutes in the 70s, and then we started coming back down. And radio is, of course, been a huge influence on this. And 3.5 minutes. I mean, they didn't play stuff that was 4 minutes, except for Bohemian Rhapsody was, you know, the rare.
A few Dylan songs.
Yeah, Stairway to Heaven on the classic rock stations. You know, the people usually say, "What about Blowing in the Wind?" or "What about?" You know? Yes, and I'm not Bob Dylan, and probably you aren't either. So let's stay with the majority.
With the majority, yeah.
Shoot for the stars, but you know, well, so idea is just cutting away unnecessary, and a lot of it's just habitual. So if I had an intro that was 8 bars, let's say it was 8 bars and it was fine. It was enough. You know, it was like maybe I'd changed chords a few times. And so when I would get to my, if it was a standard form, say intro, verse, chorus, after the chorus, I would just habitually go back and play that intro again. What some folks call turnaround. Because that's what I grew up. Now, I used to say that's what I grew up listening to, but that's what I grew up thinking I was hearing. Because when I went back and analyzed Beatles songs and others, I thought, they're not doing that. and unless it's a killer hook like Day Tripper, you hear the whole riff.
Yeah.
But if it was just strumming an intro or like a Buddy Holly song or whatever, they wouldn't go back and immediately repeat that intro. Or if it was 8 bars, they'd give you 4 bars. Just to sort of, because there was a little need for perhaps rest from lyrically between the chorus and then going to a new verse. So, you know, but just asking these questions was a whole new world for me.
I think that was a tip you gave us
in that workshop.
In that workshop, also to take a song that really kind of resonates with you, and to analyze it, to rip it apart. How long is the intro? Is there a verse? Is there a pre-chorus? I remember you saying that to us, to go through it and really like write down and rip it apart and go, well, why is it appealing to me? Where does it go? Does it go? It goes intro, verse, chorus. You know.
And that's an exercise that I picked up from Tom, and he picked up from his publisher in Nashville, and it was because he was saying, as he told the story, I know I write strong songs. You signed me to a publishing deal. A lot of my stuff gets held, but it doesn't get cut at that point. He's had quite a bit of success over the years because he really works at his craft. He's an incredible artist, and he continues to evolve his craft, which is to me, that's the combination. You know, that's the winning combination. So, and his publisher said, take a big hit and it needs to be a big hit, because if you want to have hits, you need to be thinking about what works for a lot of people, and put it on and write down the first thing that happens and how long it goes on, the next thing that happens. And so you're taking the components, as you said, and just mapping the songs. I call it song mapping. And you map out all those decisions. And what you learn very often is there are things happening that you didn't realize as a listener. You thought you knew the song because you know it as an emotional recipient.
Yes.
But when you notice, oh, Joni Mitchell took 2 bars out of that intro the second time. She dropped it the third time. That pushed. What did that do? Why would she do that? You start asking, why? I didn't notice, so it worked. Yeah. It wasn't like, hey, that intro is missing, So they're cutting away the unnecessary extra so that they're cutting the diamond. They're taking that raw diamond and they're cutting it and they're faceting it. So it has the most sparkle, the most shine, the most energy, the most purity. And you want to hear it again and again rather than maybe you hear it once and you think, okay, that was enough for now, and I'll come back to it later.
Yeah.
And it inevitably shortens your arrangements. It has for me, certainly.
A general rule, so you're saying for radio, for example, would be the shorter the better. You have a better chance of kind of getting listened to if the song is crafted well.
Yeah, I'd say.
Chance, do you think, of getting played?
I think all things considered, if you're coming in, again, these are generalities, so I can't say it's a rule. But I realize you're not using it as a hard, fast rule like Perkins rules. He rules. But given, and this is the market. Okay, here's the market discussion. If you're taking yourself to market as an artist and you're competing with everything that they're currently playing, well, first of all, become aware of what else they're playing. And if if you want to get on KISS FM, whatever, syndicated radio in the States or whatever, and there's a long trail to that, and we don't have time. I can't explain it because everybody would be doing it. But if that's if the commercial pop market is your goal, take Billboard Top 10 and download those songs and analyze those songs, and also check the links on those songs. And I have not looked at the Billboard Top 10 in a long time. I'm an industry guy who doesn't call himself an industry guy, because it just gets in the way of my writing process. I realize I'm just in my own little bubble, and that's fine. I mean, I listen to a lot of music, but I just don't follow hits because it's just not my world. I'm not trying to inhabit that world. So, and yet I imagine that if I were to pull up right now, if you and I were to magically pull up the top 10 and check the links of the songs, I don't think there'd be a song over that wasn't under 4 minutes.
Probably not.
Yeah. I mean, that's just how it is.
Now,
if we went to the the folk DJ list, the singer-songwriter, the largely volunteer DJs in the U.S. and North America and some in Europe, who play singer-songwriter and are dedicated and generally came from the folk tradition. Plenty of songs that are 4 and 5 minutes
easily. Story songs
and the craft, and they can be incredible. I mean, I love they keep you engaged if it keeps me for 5 minutes, and bring it on.
But that's the style of music, of course. It relates to that style of music. Yeah. Of course, it all depends on the genre we're speaking about, whether it's pop or rock or, as you said,
and the target,
the target market,
and the target. If you're targeting, again, that critical inch question, am I going to market with this? But nowhere in this discussion, I hope, does anyone take away that I think you should sacrifice your connection to the song. I mean, now look, if somebody told me, we love this song you wrote, at this point, I'm 58. I've been at this a long time. Some people buy houses. I make records, I'm making a new one. I'm in the studio right now. And because I love it. It's my passion. I would do it if it never paid me a dime. And there've been times where it has not paid me a dime, and I've paid lots of dimes. So if they said, okay, we love this song, but we're gonna change the arrangement all around, and take this line out that you love, I'd say, okay. If it was going to make it a hit for somebody else would
be open to that.
No problem. My ego's not attached. Sure, I can still be in love with my original version. Go for it. But 30 years ago, even 20 years ago, I would have been too precious about it. I would have said no, don't do it. And precious is maybe too hard of a word. I don't want to be disregarding. If that's whatever your standard is, whatever you're comfortable with, whatever your moral code or your artist integrity code is, the business is the business. It's not. It has no morals. It has no moral code. It's industry. It sells widgets. It sells widgets. That's it. I mean, wing nuts or pop hits. It's or popcorn, whatever. It's the same stuff. So it just happens to be, the music is part of that. It's a very strange thing. I find the less I pay attention to it, the more happy I am, and the more productive as a writer.
Absolutely. The business can get in the way if you let it. Of course, it's an integral part of being successful, I guess, within the business. But you can't let it rule the heart and soul of what you're
No,
doing.
I think so many, you know, growing up and coming up through the LA music business, if you will, there was a time when I shifted and thought, okay, I'm going to try and write for the market. And I really started reading the books and studying, and it was educational. And I found out it's not. I used to make these disparaging remarks about hit writers, saying, "Oh, anybody could write a Disney song."
Yeah,
you know, the work the craft that goes into nailing one of those. You know, just being 2% off, you can hear it. It doesn't fly. I mean, to nail that, it's mastery of craft, and even those who do it, who are the top at the game, are usually not at the top of the game for that long. You know, you hear about them for a while and they're gone. Diane Warren would be like the one who's stayed in one of the longest running, whatever you may feel about her hits. But if you don't know them, Google them. And it's all over the world. I mean, her songs have touched millions of lives. So she's tapped in, and I'm very aware of the industry. I'm sure she's been the backbone of it for the songwriting community. But I still feel like there's a connection. I mean, I don't doubt that she's connected to what she's writing. When people ask me in my consultations and in my workshops, tell us how to develop our lyrics better, you know, and boy, I can show you in a few moments, I can show you how to alter a melody. But to develop lyrical skill is a lifelong pursuit. I said earlier at the start that writing is an evolution and a lifelong pursuit if you're open to it. And that's certainly true. But lyrics, I mean, great writing, it takes time. And when I say great writing, I am not referring to my own work. I aspire to the level of writing. When I read, you know, everyone's got their own. So if I quote my favorite authors, you know, but when I read Tolkien as a kid, you know, I was amazed by the story. When I read it as an adult, the Hobbit, you know, the writing. When I read and when I did that, when I did the song mapping, I did the writer mapping. I take a chapter that was moving, and I would go back and say, what words? Because I didn't notice his words. They were going right in. They were creating a whole world. So I went back and watched how this man. I still couldn't understand how he created a world with words, with the same words that you and I are using. You know, that it was just
incredible.
It baffles the mind, you know.
Yeah.
And so what I tell people, and it's not a dodge, but it really is I say, feed the well with great writing, not just songs, but certainly study this writers who Leonard Cohen and Dylan, if you will, or Joni Mitchell. And I'm sure there are some that I can't quote right now in this generation. Billie Eilish, my daughter's crazy for her. I haven't checked the lyrics from where if they resonate with me, but I'm not her audience really, probably. But also great authors, the written word. Immerse yourself in great writing, because you will eventually, you're storing that somewhere. You know, they say we store everything. It's access that's the challenge. And so if you're constantly watching like silly sitcoms, you know, with like little quippy jokes, that's going to inform your language and the way you interact with people. I'm certainly influenced by whatever I'm reading or writing or listening to. So, you know, there's the old adage, garbage in, garbage out. Well, quality in, quality out. So, sometimes I'm reading 2 or 3 books at a time because I'm moving. It's like flipping between dials. This is wonderful writing, like for tension and suspension. This is wonderful writing for romantic imagery. This is wonderful fantasy writing. You know, and I don't have a direct correlation, but I know that it's informed. When I get a line that comes and I think, wow, you know, did I steal that? I mean, that's above my pay grade, that line, you know. That's like, I'm keeping that, you know, I'm keeping that. I know that it's because I've taken in so much of quality work, and also not just mainstream. I mean, mostly I listen to independent writers because that's been my business.
Yes.
There's so much out there.
That's another good tip. Yeah, indeed. quality in, quality out. No, the writers that are well read, as we say, tend to put out a higher level of lyrical content anyway.
Yes,
that seems to me to be apparent if you look at the Leonard Cohens and look at the people of that caliber.
Yeah, and actually, and I got in a lot of trouble for saying this 30 years ago, and I'm going to say it again. It was true for me. When I was, one of the things I was doing through the Academy, the National Academy of Songwriters, was hosting. I became the host of an existing series called the Acoustic Underground at the Troubadour, the world famous Troubadour, where all the greats came up on the West Coast. And we had this Artist of the Year competition, and it was packed with industry. It was quite, it was kind of the peak of the resurgence of the performing songwriter. This was 98, 99. And because I was traveling a lot and enjoyed the East Coast, I got to know a lot of the East Coast songwriters. So I would invite them out to perform. And time and again, they were the more literate. Their songs were far more developed lyrically. Also, they were using a lot more alternate tunings and things because they were from major universities. They were, they were social workers. They were people. They were just immersed in another level. They came from another level, and not to I wasn't trying to put down the LA people, but the LA people had grown up in an industry town focused on popular music, and they were clever, and they had clever rhymes, but they didn't have songs that touched in the way, at least for me. And that turned out to be true as well with the judging, because the ones who often were lifted up in the competitions were these East Coast writers. So yeah, I found that to be true. I'm self-educated. I mean, I think we're always educating ourselves. I said to someone yesterday in a session, I was meeting with a very well-established jazz guitarist who's going to play on a session for me next week. And I realized it's funny how the ego can catch you out. So I realized I was slightly intimidated by his knowledge of the guitar. And I heard myself say that I was musically illiterate. And I heard it and I went, what? What? Hang on. I said, no, I am limited in the language of music. I'm not illiterate. I have a limited literacy because I don't read music and I don't have theory knowledge. And so, I mean, for him, it was nothing. I mean, he didn't get hung up on that, but I needed to clarify it for me.
Yeah, you caught yourself saying it and went, hold on a minute.
I caught myself putting myself down, and like, so,
what
am I doing that for? So still learning.
If you were to give a younger songwriter who's sort of beginning in their career any kind of advice, what would you say to them if you were to sum up something and say, this is the advice I'd give you as a beginner songwriter?
As a beginning songwriter, it depends who that, because I'd have a different answer for a 14-year-old beginning songwriter when I think of when I started, and I do consult with songwriters as young as that on occasion. I would say to surround yourself, or at least find one or two people whose opinion and whose perspective you can trust to be a consultant to your work, not to change you. But I think, I see. It really depends. When when you play your first song for the family, you finally bring it out of the bedroom and you play it. It's so important that everybody loves it. It doesn't always happen, of course, but so I don't want to say don't limit yourself to just your mates, because it's important to have that support group, that completely subjective support group. But I'll say this: if you are a beginning songwriter who dreams of doing this for a living or having it be a part of your life, then it's an important journey. It would be like finding a great therapist. You don't just go out and Google consultants and hire the first one. Find people who get who you are and get what you're about and will support your intent with your art, and use them as a guideline, but not without surrendering who you are, because it needs to feed your soul. I mean, it's your path, it's your songs, it's your life, and that's your life. I mean, that's your soul life.
but maybe also not be afraid of a little bit of constructive, not criticism, but
guidance. Constructive feedback, guidance. Yes, but it is very important to find people who can do so in a way that you can take it in. Because, like, I mentioned that first class I went to when I was 17. It was not a pleasant experience. I mean, the guy was right in everything he said, but it was Jack Siegel, who's long gone, and I'm sure. I mean, he wrote hits like "Scarlet Ribbons" and these "When Sunny Gets Blue." I mean, but he was this New York, little guy from New York, and he sounded like he had a cigar in his mouth. I probably didn't, but and he just said, "I don't know what the rest of this crap's about." And he just took a red pen and just X and circled one line. He goes, "But when you rewrite it, you can start there."
So maybe not the best way to go about it.
Tough love. It was tough love,
Oh dear.
Yeah.
That's gotta stay with you that's gonna hurt.
Well, I'm glad I can laugh about it now.
Yeah, I know.
Because I wasn't laughing.
Fantastic. We'll leave it there, Brett. That was a great chat, very informative, and thank you so very much for imparting your knowledge there today.
Oh, my pleasure.
It was great to have you. I will leave some links below, Brett, for people who want to find how to reach you. They can do that if they'd like.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I do consult with songwriters. It's an ongoing thing that I do. So
fantastic. Or songwriting guidance or anything like that. But links will be below, folks, for that. So and Brett, thank you very, very much for your time and your knowledge today.